He's all right.
Good morning, everybody. We're going to get started with the Judicial Public Safety Committee in just a minute. We're just waiting for the folks arriving to settle down. So just hang in there. We'll get started in just a minute. We're ready. Yeah, we're ready.
Good morning, everyone. The time being 9 a.m. on Thursday, September 10th. I'd like to call the Judicial and Public Safety Committee meeting to order. First of all, Karen, would you do roll call?
Sure. Iqbal? Kenyon?
Here.
Lewis?
Here.
Martin?
Present.
Sanchez? Thomas? Leonard?
Here. Okay, we have a quorum. Moving on, I'll need a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the August 13th meeting. Moved by Dr. Iqbal, seconded by Mr. Kenyon. Any changes, additions, corrections, deletions? Seeing none and hearing none, please take roll.
Iqbal? Kenyon?
Yes.
Thomas? Lewis?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Leonard?
Yes. The minutes are approved. I don't see anyone here for public comment, so we'll move on to monthly financials. Ms. Wagner?
Good morning. The August budget and accounts payable report were included in your agenda packet for review. This month's P-card report was posted outside the agenda packet just due to timing. It wasn't available to download from the bank in time to make it into the packet. So it's there outside the agenda for your review as well. In the general fund, the coroner's office remains over the recommended budget amount. So there will need to be a budget adjustment for consideration coming through the committee. So I did ask the coroner to provide us some information, and we'll work with him on that as well. Special revenue funds trending higher than recommended for this time of the year have been reviewed. In all cases, there is enough fund balance to cover the current expenditures. So we'll continue to monitor that going forward.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Wagner? Seeing none, thank you once again.
Thanks very much.
Moving on to the State's Attorney's Office, we have Ms. Kelly Orland with us.
Yes,
Ms.
good
Orland?
morning. Good morning, thank you. I am Assistant State's Attorney Kelly Orland. I am here today on behalf of Joe McMahon. I have no report. I do, however, have some case filing numbers to report. Year to date from January 1st, we've had 1,713 felony filings, 435 DUI filings, 741 domestic violence filings, 11,996 traffic filings, and 1,378 misdemeanor filings. Those numbers are a slight increase over where we were at about this time last year. So we're going to continue just to monitor that going forward to make sure we can account for that should that continue to increase. There's been a bit of a lull lately, getting cases moving through the system, but we're having a little bit of a backlog in that regard, but we work daily with our partners in the Public Defender's Office and with the judiciary to move forward on that. And I think that's something we'll be able to overcome. And that's all I have to report today.
Great. Any questions for Ms. Orland? You know, I wanted to mention too that I was told that Ms. Orland is going to be part of the transition team for the new state's attorney that comes in, transitioning from State's Attorney McMahon to our new person. So thank you very much for being on that and helping us through that transition.
Thank you so much. Happy to do it.
Moving on to the sheriff, Sheriff Hain.
Morning, everyone. Great to have Kelly Orland in the room. Worked with her for what, 20 years now, Kelly? So
Yeah, I'd say about 20 years.
got a lot of history together. She's great for the transition team. So just a couple of quick talking points. COVID-19 jail status. We all remember that we reported about a month ago that we had a contained outbreak in the jail. That started August 13th with 30 positive cases in the facility. We've been testing every 7 days, everybody in the facility, and making it available to all employees. So a week later, we were able to drop it to 27. The following week, we got it down to, there we go, 7 total cases with 3 new. And then our results just came back from this week, and we only have 1 positive case in the facility. So I just want to thank all the judicial partners for working with us on this. I know it's put a lot of weight on them in moving court people around and new considerations at bond call. But because of all that consideration and support and great work by the health department and IDPH in their guidance and how we move people around and mitigate the exposure, dropped our numbers significantly, obviously. So almost in the clear. Just a quick snapshot of how our employees are working in the facility. I know this board and the CAAC committee have helped us acquire a lot of the essential high-end PPE, and this is just a snapshot. So consider working in this 8 to 12 hours a day for an entire shift where you're around a quarantine cell block. So not an easy task for our people. We're very proud to announce that we were running diversion programs within the jail, job training that we talked about over the last year and a half. And one of our missions was to turn that to the outside and make it available for people in the community. So we opened up our first forklift class last month. We have another one coming up on September 25th. Just to keep people socially distanced, it's only 15 openings per class. We had all 15 filled in the August class. 13 people showed and all got certified and placed with employment at the end of the day. So 7 of those people were previous detainees with us who were on the outside. Our case management team keeps tabs with them, and they came back and took the class. So very proud of the work that they're doing. It's really important for us to point out as we think about the CARES Act funding and what the county side is doing on behalf of municipalities. So as you know, we've been very invested in Hesed House ever since they had an outbreak in, it was the end of March. And we had a new issue arise where the health department had been funding their secondary shelter that was allowing for 100 additional people to be at the facility. This was providing fencing, portable showers, and toilets at that secondary facility. The health department was unable to continue funding as of tomorrow, September 11th. The city of Aurora only offered Hesed House a line of credit to support the continuance of that equipment. And Hesed House simply said, we can't afford to pay back a line of credit being a nonprofit homeless shelter with no other funding since we can't fundraise during this time. So I committed support from the sheriff's office. It's going to be roughly $25,000 a month to maintain that equipment there. This is directly related to the COVID issue. So we're supporting them September and October. Hopefully they'll have their CARES Act funding in place at Hesed House by November, and we'll be able to step back and continue that forward. So the reason why I bring this up, we have to remember the significant risk to public health and public safety if they shut that shelter down tomorrow and turned out 100 people on the streets of Aurora. So that's why I felt it was important for us to jump in and give them a hand. And of course, the health department business compliance that we've been supporting them through, we've worked with over 100 businesses in Kane to get them in line with the executive orders. We have not had to take any enforcement action on them, knock on wood. I don't anticipate us having to do so, but we've tried to put onus on the police agencies in Kane to mitigate their own complaints within their incorporated areas. We've only had 3 police agencies out of 34 come forward and say that they're willing to do so. So again, that weight falls back on the sheriff's office to continue that. So just a couple examples of what we continue to do countywide. And I think it's important to note that, you know, of those police agencies, we also did not hear from Aurora or Elgin on their commitment to supporting us in this. So we're still taking the lead on that. That concludes just an overview of the last month and where we're heading going forward. And I do have 2 resolutions up.
Sheriff, would you mind presenting the first one, and we'll get a motion in a second, then to discuss and approve.
Certainly. The first one is a reappointment of Pete Bergert to the Sheriff's Merit Commission for another 6-year term. He's the chairman of the Merit Commission.
Need a motion and a second on that. Mr. Kenyon moves, seconded by Dr. Iqbal. Any questions, concerns? Seeing none and hearing none. Karen, would you please take roll on that?
Iqbal? Yes. Kenyon?
Yes.
Lewis?
yes,
Martin?
Yes.
Sanchez?
yes,
Leonard?
Yes. Resolution is approved and moved forward. The second resolution approving the purchase of protective gear. I'd like a motion and a second before the sheriff explains that to us. Moved by Mr. Martin, seconded by Mr. Kenyon. Sheriff Hain.
So the large amount of civil unrest that we saw here in June really spread police resources thin. Historically, we relied upon a multi-agency response task force for riot control. They're called a mobile field force. Because there were so many uprisings in a short amount of time. Only 25, for example, 25 members of that field force were able to respond to Aurora, and that simply was not enough. So we enacted our own mobile field force at the sheriff's office with a mixture of sheriff's deputies and corrections officers to the total of 60 members, which allowed us to activate during that week and put them on those front lines. Unfortunately, they were out there with equipment that was bought for Y2K, so extremely outdated, and they didn't have the ballistic protective vests that are essential, especially considering that they took gunfire in Aurora, as we've talked about previously. So this acquisition will provide them with ballistic vests specifically for riot control situations, civil unrest, and also ballistic helmets.
Any questions for the sheriff on this? If not, would you please do roll call, Karen?
Igbo? Kenyon?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Sanchez?
Yes.
Leonard?
Yes. Resolution's approved, moves forward. I would like to point out that that $67,900 and some dollars that the sheriff is expending is coming out of his funds. So there's no request for general fund usage there. Once again, thank you, Sheriff, for that. And also, too, I wanted to thank you. You gave a brief report at the county board meeting on Tuesday about your retirement program, which you had the authority to implement, and the success of that with 14 people agreeing to exercise their right to early retirement. And that will be saving the county approximately $3.8 million over the next 2 years. So once again, Sheriff, thank you very much. We really appreciate all your efforts. Thank you. Anything else for the sheriff? Mr. Chairman?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just a clarification, the help of the $25,000 a month because of the discontinuance at Hesed House, does that come out of the request for COVID funding because it is due to COVID?
Because we've seen somewhat of a restriction and new direction on CARES Act funding and the spread out to municipalities, we were concerned that we couldn't rely on that. So currently I am taking it out of, again, our general fund budget.
Thank you, Sheriff. Before we move on, Ms. Lewis, I think you had a question for the sheriff.
Yeah, no, I just have a comment also about Hesed House. I happen to live in District 3, which is where Hesed House is located. And I also work in that area. And as we all know, zip code 60505 has got the highest outbreak of COVID. And that's right where Hesed House is. So I am excited and proud that somebody in our government group understands the seriousness of the situation, both for health reasons and also for safety in Aurora. It's definitely an alarming thing when you're on the east side of Aurora and you see the issue that has been caused by this. So thank you for taking the lead. I know there's some issues with Aurora, and as the chairman said, I do hope that Aurora, when they get their funding, steps in and takes some ownership too. So thank you very much, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Sheriff Fain. We'll move on to Judiciary and Courts. Chief Judge Hall.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. As we head into what I would say the fourth quarter and then the first quarter of 2021, the court system is really focusing, I would say, on three main things. One is to continue to protect the health and safety of the people that come in our building, not only our employees, but also litigants and attorneys. Second, we want to make sure that everybody has due process, which is a concern that we have right now because there are people who cannot afford attorneys, who don't have access to technology. We have to make sure that they still have access to our court system. So in some counties like Lake County, where you hear they're 100% remote, we are still trying to do a kind of a hybrid of partially in person, partially remote. And then the third thing is, as Ms. Orland had indicated, is that we want to keep the cases moving. There was a backlog that was established a couple, 2 or 3 months when we were all kind of on lockdown. We're trying to work our way through that. 2 areas of concern that we have are one, our criminal jury trials, as the sheriff has alluded to a number of different times. Because of COVID, we've had a lot more people in the jail and who are charged with crimes that are in custody that can't get jury trials. because of the space limitations, we can only have one room at the Judicial Center that can do jury trials. And as a result, we're trying to push that all through. We've been doing a great job, but obviously there's limitations there. So we've continued to work with the sheriff on EHM and on bail conditions, but that's one area of concern. The second is evictions. Obviously, we know that there's a moratorium right now. That's supposed to, we're waiting to see what what Governor Pritzker does. But obviously, we're anticipating that we're going to see a large volume of cases get filed. So we're in the midst of working with presiding Judge Bowles to have that set up at 3rd Street. So that's an area of concern. One of the things I did want to share is I'm on meetings, as many of you are, with different people from across the state. From my perspective, it's chief judges and the Administrative Office of Illinois Courts. I wanted to just share a couple things. One is very proud to be part of Kane County. It's interesting to hear about counties throughout the state where the cooperative, there's not as much cooperation as we have here. So it's really interesting to hear when other counties talk about how they're not working with their sheriff, or their sheriff isn't working with them, or the county board isn't supportive. So I think we're really lucky to have that. I also think that the credibility that our system and our county has is really high. And it's really, and the reason I want to outline these is because as we go into the 4th quarter and the 1st quarter of next year, we're trying to concentrate on how do we continue to do the same thing. The areas that I think we've done real well in, and this is why people feel safe coming to our facilities, is one, we've communicated our policies. You can go on the website and you can see, if I'm coming to court, what do I need to do? How do I access it remotely? And that's helped a lot. Second, the sheriff, the cooperation that we've had from the get-go with the temperature taking, the COVID question screening. When somebody enters, just like when we enter here, when you're asked questions about COVID, when you have your temperature taken, people are entering our building feeling confident that we're on top of it. And that's something that builds and enhances that credibility. Third, I see Ricky here, but the county was on top of it and said, hey, we want to add these cleaning crews. The cleaning crews that have been made part of it through the COVID funding, they're in uniform. They're visible to everybody that comes in, and those people are working throughout the building throughout the day, wiping down high contact points, walking through the courthouse, walking into the courtrooms. And again, we had justice managers, but there's a mental health component for everybody that sees that, because they know the buildings are clean and they know that we're on top of it. The next thing is there were procedures that were set up. The clerk's office has been cooperative, and bailiffs, we're doing contact tracing forms. That was a recommendation that Barb Jeffers made to us, where anybody that comes into a courthouse or one of our courtrooms does a contact tracing form. We've had incidents of people who have had tested positive for COVID, and we've been able to give Barb everybody that's been in that courtroom, so that saves them a ton of time, because they can target that and we can concentrate our efforts instead of kind of a shotgun approach. And again, if it wasn't for the clerk's office stepping up in that and the bailiffs, we wouldn't have that. Roger, the IT, again, not to really, well, I am going to brag about our county, but our IT department, people are calling us to find out how we've done what we've done. And really, it all goes back to Roger and his team kind of innovating right from the very start. And because we innovated from the start, we've had bumps in the road, but we've been able to learn from those bumps, and we're continuing to adapt, which is, I think, really important as we head into this next phase, because the AOIC is telling us, and it's the same thing you're reading, we maybe have to be prepared to go back to a full remote, and we're prepared to do that thanks to Roger and his team. And then finally, within the system itself, the PD's office, the sheriff, the private bar, the clerk, everybody's working, court services, to get us those cases through. So again, it's a cooperative effort. How do we get the cases heard? Are we willing to start early? Are we willing to stay late? And as a result, that's why I think people feel real good about what's going on. What we're trying to do, though, is obviously with the COVID funding ending in December, we've got cleaning crew issues. The sheriff has talked about how do we get people in. Right now, it's nice weather, so if people are waiting outside, they're okay with waiting outside. But what happens in October, November, December, when we try to get them through and everybody has to get bunched up? So if I look at again, why is there a high level of credibility and trust in what we're doing as a system? It's because of those steps. On our end, on the judicial side and public safety side, we have to figure out how to continue to do that. And if there isn't funding from COVID, what do we do to try to continue to maintain that level of service? But I'm proud of everybody and the efforts that have been made. I'm appreciative of the county board and the support that you've given us. And again, you look at us across the state, we work together very, very well, and I appreciate that. So that's my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the Chief Judge? If not, I would just like to say, I was at an event last night, and one of your fellow judges was commenting on what a great job you're doing as the new Chief Judge. And we were talking about it, and I said, well, he really hasn't had too much to do. He's had the transition with the new public defender. He's had the pandemic, remote courts. I mean, I don't know how he's doing it all, but we thank you very much, Judge, for all your work, because everyone works so well together in this committee and helps each other out. And you have thanked everyone but yourself, so I'd like to thank you for all you do too.
Thanks, Bill. Great team. Thank you.
Moving on to Court Services Administration, Ms. Ost.
Good morning. I have a resolution in front of you, but before that, I'll give you a little update on my department. So one is we finally finished our annual report, and although it's embarrassing that it was late, I'm proud that we were able to do it at all. So you all should have received that in your email. The other thing is that the judge is right. We've been all hands on deck as far as trying to get everything running as smoothly as possible. So within court services, we've had to distribute a lot of our staff or redistribute them to kind of plug holes or help where we can. For example, I've got staff who have become experts at Zoom, and they're figuring out how to assist the judges in running their court calls, especially for the specialty courts. We've dedicated 2 employees to sitting in violation court simply to help the people in the courtroom figure out when defendants are in violation of their probation status, is it willful or not? Because things like, do you have enough minutes on your phone so that you can get therapy done? These are things that aren't always easy to determine. My probation officers know that, so they're sitting in court and trying to help with those kinds of issues. We're continuing to see our defendants in the field. We're not bringing them into the office, so we're decreasing literally body mass in the office or within the buildings. We're doing our best to socially distance, but that means we're putting a lot of miles on the cars. And so by way of that, I'm transitioning to give a little foreshadowing. As you all know, in last year's budget, it was approved for court services to receive 5 additional cars. With COVID, the factories really either closed or substantially slowed down. So we have not received those cars yet. I don't think that we're in a crunch yet where we have to do anything financially with that, but I'm giving you some foreshadowing that I might have to come back in November to ensure that those funds roll over to next year whenever the factories get up and rolling. So just foreshadowing there. Other than that, I have a resolution in front of you if you're ready for me to talk about
Ms.
it.
Ost, would you explain that? I'll get a motion and a second to discuss first. Moved by Mr. Kenyon, seconded by Dr. Iqbal. Ms. Ost, please go ahead.
So the resolution in front of you is to continue with our contract with One Hope United for MultiSystemic Therapy. This is a therapy that we use to counsel families who have juvenile, at least one juvenile who's involved with the criminal system, and they're at risk of being removed from the home. So it's a very intensive parent coaching program where we have therapists who are on call. They work with only 3 or 4 families, and they very intensively work with those families. They could call them at any time when they're in crisis and be coached through the situation. It's more critical now than it's ever been because we have a lot of families in distress. They're all cooped up together, and there's a lot of domestic violence and things like that happening. So it's a really critical, important program for us and for the courts. The term of the contract, we're issuing a new RFP. We're trying to get things settled. So this is kind of to bridge us until the new RFP can be issued. The payment is not to exceed $230,000 annually, and that is not coming out of general fund. That is coming out of probation fees. So there's no impact on the general fund.
Any questions from Ms. Ost or myself on that resolution? Seeing none and hearing none, please take the roll, Karen.
Iqbal? Yes. Kenyon?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Sanchez?
Yes.
Leonard.
Yes. Before I let you go, Ms. Oster, I'd just like to say, this last year, you have done a number of different things, getting us grants and monies and reimbursement on salaries, and we're so appreciative of that. But also, too, all the other things you do, I guess we never say thank you for that. I mean, it's nice to hear a little summary of what every department does, because I think most of us on the board appreciate and like everything that is being done, but we don't have a full comprehension of everything that you do. So thank you for that report, and thank you once again for all your service.
Thank you.
Moving on, we'll go to the Juvenile Justice Center. Mr. Davis?
Good morning. Just a quick update on the COVID situation at the JJC that I discussed last month. I'm happy to report that all of our staff members are back at work. Actually, I think this is probably the first time since the pandemic began that we don't have anybody out with any symptoms. All of our employees are back at work. All of our kids are back in regular programming, so we have no cases currently at the Juvenile Justice Center. So we reopened to the public on Monday, August 24th. Our teachers returned to the classroom, and we resumed in-person non-contact visitation on August 30th. So there was a lot of work by a lot of different agencies and a lot of different people that went into getting things back up to speed so quickly. So we appreciate everyone's assistance. Beyond that, everything continues to move forward. We have our IBJJ inspection from the state coming up on September 23rd, which I'll report on next month. Aside from that, I can take any questions if anyone has any.
Any questions for Mr. Davis? You know, on a personal note, Mr. Davis, I wanted to mention, the other day, I was at the Juvenile Justice Center, and I was showing my wife the grounds and the facilities, and I explained what you were doing and what it was like inside there, and she said to me, she goes, "How can anybody handle that?" And I said, "Well, Mr. Davis does a great job." She goes, "I would love to meet him sometime." So I'm going to make sure that happens.
Thank you very much.
So
I look
thank you,
forward
Mr.
to it.
Davis, very much. Appreciate all your work. Moving on, we'll go to Kane County. Ms. Guthrie.
Good morning. I just have a brief update this morning. Our activities and statistics are included in the packet. As you can see from the call for service report, our activity is almost in line with where we were at this point last year. We're actually up almost 1,000 phone calls over last year. So as we see the increase in calls for service, it's not just the officer initiated activity that's getting back to normal. It's also generated by phone calls received at the center where we're sending police and fire to. There is a new phone report from our new phone system that's included in the packet. It's not exactly the most visually appealing at this time, but we will have the report redone by next month. It at least includes the statistics and where we're at now. Other than that, we are working very quickly to fill our vacancies. We had a great turnout and testing group with our last group of applicants. They are in the psychological exam process now, and we've worked very closely with the diagnostic center on, testing for the right skills and looking back at past employees and who's been successful and comparing those results. So that is all I have this month.
Any questions for Ms. Guthrie? And once again, Ms. Guthrie, you were saying you're about 1,000 calls higher than you were last year?
Phone calls, yes.
And with the transition of people coming and going, everything's gone seamlessly. So thank you once again, Ms. Guthrie, for all your work.
Thank you.
Moving on to the Merit Commission, do we have a report on that? Doesn't look like it. We'll go to the Circuit Clerk, Mr. Hartwell.
Good morning. And yes, thank you, Judge Hull. It's been a pleasure working with you. You've done a fantastic job. What we're looking at is there is an increase in new case filings as well as filings going to court, or cases going to court. But overall, we're still considerably down, some 34%. It still looks like that we're going to have a revenue shortfall of about $2.5 million. Fortunately, with the COVID funds, County Board is able to work with that, but we're still working, trying to get our numbers up. Collections are still buzzing along right now. They're all current. So if anyone has any questions.
Any questions from Mr. Hartwell? You know, Mr. Hartwell, once again, I always look at your report when I get it before, a few days before the meeting, and I'm always so encouraged and thrilled to see what you're doing with everything that's going on and collections are still coming in on past due money. So the 313,000 that you received in the last month is great. And for the year, you've done an outstanding job. So
Well, thank you. I
once again.
appreciate that. But, a lot of that success is from the state's attorney's office, and they're the ones who really run the collections. We simply send the files. So they've hired a good outfit to do it, and they're doing their job, getting us the information we need to pass on. So, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hartwell? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you, Mr. Hartwell. To our public defender, Ms. Conant.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As Ms. Orland indicated with the state's attorney's office, our numbers are up. Although I will say they're higher than last year, but it does seem that we are maintaining from last month to this month. Our felony assistants are carrying on average upwards of the high 80s to low 90s in clients. So there is a little bit of a backlog right now that we are working through and working through with our judicial partners. We've been working with the state's attorney's office to get offers and to try to close a lot of these cases that weren't able to be closed during the shutdown. As I've mentioned before, part of the backlog on our part, it's difficult at this time with our clients, and we are really seeing the impact that the shutdown has had on them and the loss of jobs, which correlates to a loss of phones, loss of housing, which makes it very difficult for us to maintain contact with them. But I would like to thank Adult Court Services. They've been phenomenal in helping us to track down numbers for our clients, as well as the sheriff during the shutdown at the jail that made it very difficult to visit with our clients there. His staff has been phenomenal in allowing us to use tablets to talk to our clients there and phone calls. So that has been a great help to us in moving cases along. Finally, I'd just like to echo a lot of what Judge Hall said. On a daily basis, I talk to private attorneys and public defenders in other counties, and I can't tell you the number of times that they are just so surprised at how far along King County is in terms of technology and what we're doing here. So as Judge Hall said, well, first I'd like to thank him because I think that most of that is his doing and his pushing us all to move forward and to accept all this new technology. But it really is a great feeling to be a part of a county that is so far ahead of all the others.
Thank you, Ms. Conant. Any questions for Ms. Conant? I'd just like to say that in the 5 months, 6 months now that you have been public defender, everyone speaks your praises and says how easy you are to work with and how efficient you are. So not only does the judge feel that way, but everyone else that works with you. So we thank you very much for being our public defender and for the great job you're doing.
Thank you.
Chairman, do you mind if I just make one comment about that? Just when we talk about change in processes, I think it's kind of interesting when she was talking about court services. So with all of us kind of working together, just to give you an idea, maybe 6 or 7 months ago, if somebody didn't appear for court, a warrant would be issued in most cases. And then that person would get picked up and law enforcement would have to go through, and that's a public safety issue. They would have to get brought to the jail and they would stay at the jail. We would have to go through bond call and there would be incarceration for a period of time, sometimes 7 to 10 days for a file to get it back into court. And so collectively, kind of the way that that's changed, and it's a little bit COVID, but it's a little bit philosophy too, is that what we've all been doing, and again, at county board, as it relates to the court services, we've tried to start doing things that we do for dentist and doctor appointments. We have a service with IT where people can get court reminders of their court date. Because a lot of times when somebody doesn't come, sometimes it's just they forgot about it. So, if you start from beginning to end, one of the things we're doing is we're sending out court reminders so that people get a text on their phone, hey, you have court. That helps. When people are coming to court, the public defender has phone numbers. And so we're reaching out and using pretrial services to say, hey, when was the last time you came into contact with them? And calling people from the bench to find out, hey, why aren't you here instead of issuing a warrant? I think that's the end result is we see less people getting incarcerated. We see less people. And when I say incarcerated, there are times when incarceration is necessary. But when we're talking about the amount of man hours and the amount of damage it does when somebody just misses a court date and then gets out, it's the phone calls, it's the reminders, it's the extra effort that's keeping those people out. So to me, it's just interesting to see, a change, not a change of philosophy, but a different approach. And then again, when you go to public safety at the very most basic level, without a warrant, then the police officer doesn't have to make the traffic stop to take somebody into custody to have that happen. And I think that's a huge upside. So it's just interesting to me to see how it all works. But again, it's a partnership that starts with text reminders and phone calls.
Well, thank you, Judge, and thank you, Ms. Gonit. Once again, all of you work together so well and help each other out that it makes everything work well. So when other government entities in the state talk about how well you run the judiciary system in public safety in Kane County, it's because of all of you. So we thank you all. I know I can speak for the board. We're all thrilled to have the people here that are doing what they're doing. Moving on, before I mention that unfortunately we don't have to go into executive session today, I did want to mention to Roger and his staff, thank you very much once again. You know, everything kind of centers around the IT department and he makes things so seamless. I mean, I come in here and my screen is upside down and he goes, "Here, Bill, give it to me," and he fixes it. So, I mean, he can do anything from soup to nuts and his department does a great job. So Roger, thank you and your staff so much for all you do. Next, I need a motion and a second to place our reports on file. Moved by Dr. Iqbal, seconded by Mr. Kenyon. Any questions, concerns about that? If not, Karen, would you do a roll call?
Iqbal? Kenyon?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Sanchez?
Yes.
Yes. Reports are placed on file. And lastly, I need a motion and a second to adjourn. Moved by Mr. Kenyon, seconded by Dr. Iqbal. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We're
Aye.
adjourned. Thank you all. So we're all
No
good.
golf today.
What's going on?